Okay, so this is the beginning of chapter 25. This unit also has 3 chapters: the digestive system, the male reproductive system, and the female reproductive system. So here you see an overview of part of the digestive system. Here you see a microscopic picture of villi, microvilli. So your digestive system, as an overview, is going to change the food that we ingest into smaller units so that we can get them into the blood and then into the cells of the body. So digestion is breaking down the food into a usable form. There's 2 kinds of digestion. There's mechanical digestion and chemical digestion. So mechanical digestion is like shredding a piece of paper. And so with mechanical digestion, it's mastication, where we're crushing, grinding, mixing food with saliva in the mouth. And it's compression that we see as it passes along the rest of the digestive tract. It's mixing action in the stomach. Chemical digestion is applying enzymes to break the chemical bonds within the molecules. All right, so we start with the organs. Here's an overview that you have in your chapter. In this system, the organs are divided into the gastrointestinal tract and the accessory organs. The mouth, pharynx. Now it'll only be the oro and laryngopharynx, esophagus, stomach, small intestine, because of the lumen size, not the length. Large intestine or colon, again, because of the width or lumen size, not the length. All the rest of the structures lie outside of this tube. Used to be called the alimentary canal. So the accessory structures empty into the gastrointestinal tract. The salivary glands all empty into the mouth. The liver, gallbladder, and pancreas, at least the exocrine portion, are going to empty into the small intestine. Now, one more time. The esophagus, stomach, small intestine, colon, or large intestine all share the same 4 layers of tissue. And so we're going to see a basic tissue arrangement. When we cover those, we'll go over the distinct or unique characteristics. But for now, the 4 basic tissue layers for the esophagus, the stomach, and the 2 intestines. The deepest one is the mucosa. It's the inner lining of some type of epithelial tissue. That's going to secrete mucus and affect absorption. So here it's this pink, highly convoluted surface. These folds allow for expansion. If the epithelial tissue is stratified, it's going to reduce or prevent absorption. If it's simple, then it's going to facilitate absorption. Superficial to that is the submucosa. That's this kind of grayish layer right next to the mucosa. It's areolar tissue. This is where the blood vessels are. So this is where absorption takes place. Superficial to that, you have the muscularis. And so that would be this layer here. Not the very outside. But you're going to have at least 2 layers of smooth muscle tissue. One is for compression, part of that mechanical digestion, and peristalsis, which is propelling material along a tube. So one of the layers is going to be going across or transverse. The other layer, which is more superficial, is going to run the length of the organ. So that's how you have compression and peristalsis. Superficially, you have the serosa. The serosa is peeled here. It's this outer superficial layer. It's a serous membrane, and it helps with anchoring the organs in the body cavity. Inside the abdominal cavity, we also refer to it as the visceral peritoneum. The visceral peritoneum is going to be part of the cover on the abdominal organs. Okay, in the thoracic cavity, we're going to use a different term. Okay, here we go. The adventitia. So, 2 different names for the same layer, depending on which abdominal cavity you're located in. The peritoneum, like the pleura and the pericardium, is going to have 3 functions and 3 components. So again, it's going to secrete serous fluid. That would be 1, to reduce friction so it doesn't rub around, causing damage. The second is to anchor the organs in place so they're not flopping around. And it acts as a physical barrier. That would be its third one. Now, because of the size of the abdominal cavity, the parietal pericardium has some segments that have their own name because they have a special function. So they're segments of the parietal peritoneum. The mesentery is a transparent structure, tissue that extends from the posterior wall of the abdominal cavity and extends out towards the intestines. So it's going to help with anchoring the intestines and the blood vessels. You can see the large branching here. So all of this is the mesentery. Now in this picture, it doesn't look transparent, but in real life it is. And just because it's transparent doesn't mean that it's weak. So lots of dense tissue, collagen fibers. They're just organized so that they're transparent. Now, for some reason, somebody with obviously too much time on their hands has decided to start naming segments of the mesentery. Mesocolon, mesoovarium. We're just going to use mesentery. Couple of other segments of the parietal peritoneum. The lesser omentum is a small extension attached to the superior curve of the stomach, which is right here. This is also called the lesser curve, and it extends to the dorsal side of the liver. The greater omentum is an extension of the parietal peritoneum that hangs down kind of like an apron, covering up the intestines, and it extends from the inferior curve of the stomach, which is also called the greater curve. And so all of this is the greater omentum. Both of the omenta are laden with adipose tissue surrounding the blood vessels. They both act as an barrier to infection. The greater omentum in humans is much thicker, also from dissection that I've done over the years. Cats have big ones. Rats are not quite so long or intense. So two omenta, lesser and greater. And so their function is to act as a physical barrier. Okay, so components of the mouth. The oral cavity is the space within the mouth. It's lined with a mucous membrane that has stratified squamous epithelium. This is continuous with the lining of the pharynx, the nose, and the esophagus. This is where ingestion, mastication, deglutation, and gustation occur. So those are functions. The cheeks and the lips are skeletal muscle covered by skin and lined with the mucous membrane. These form the wall of the mouth. We've had the muscles in the muscle chapter. So the muscles for mastication include masseter and temporalis. There's also a digastric muscle that wasn't on our list. These two, masseter and temporalis, elevate the mandible. The smaller digastric muscle is going to depress the mandible. So facial expressions, you had buccinator, the zygomaticus major, zygomaticus minor, and orbicularis oris. So they're also involved in ingestion, mastication. The tongue is skeletal muscle tissue covered with a modified stratified squamous epithelium. It houses the taste buds, which are your gustatory receptors. Don't forget that the here we go. Base of the tongue are the lingual tonsils. There are no gustatory receptors on the lingual tonsils. There are gustatory receptors on the tongue. So gustation, your sense of taste, mastication, and deglutition. Now, the gustatory receptors are not different. They're all the same. The interpretation of taste is done by the gustatory cortex in the parietal lobe of the brain. So they used to have these maps of the tongue where they thought that certain tastes were in certain sections. The four main tastes are sweet, sour, bitter, and what's the other one? Sweet, sour, bitter. Well, I can't think of it right now, but my brain is going to combine those to come up with the various tastes that we associate with different things. Now, don't forget that your sense of gustation is tied to your sense of olfaction. Our tongue is anchored on the proximal end, not the distal. If you think about frogs, theirs is the opposite. Theirs is anchored in the distal end, so closest to the teeth, and it flips out and comes back. Okay. The palates, we talked a little bit about these already. They form the roof of the mouth. So the hard palate is that bony section. Covered by mucous membranes. The soft palate is the skeletal muscle covered by mucous membranes. They separate the oral and nasal cavities. So in the mouth, the palates are involved in mastication and deglutition. The presence of palates is a luxury because we have the option to carry out mastication and continue to breathe. Other organisms, non-mammals, don't have that option. So like amphibians and reptiles, they have to choose between breathing and carrying out mastication. So a lot of times they will eat their food whole because they need to continue to breathe. The teeth are composed of modified bone articulating with the maxilla and the mandible. As an organism, we develop two sets of teeth. We have the deciduous teeth, which are smaller and fewer in number, and we have the permanent set, which is going to replace them. There's more of them, and they're bigger in size. Now, another way to do teeth is like fish, where they continuously replace them. We have different shapes of teeth. Sharks all have teeth that are the same exact shape. They just come in different sizes. Some have teeth that are continuously growing. And so that's where rodents have to continuously chew on things because the teeth are constantly growing and they need to wear them down. Okay. Incisors. Incisors are adapted for cutting and biting. Canines are adapted for grasping and tearing. Those are going to be angular and well developed in order to consume animal material. The molars and premolars are wider, flatter. They're adapted for crushing and grinding, and that would be for consuming plant material. So we have well-developed both groups. So that's why we're what they call omnivores, because we eat both plants and animals. Cats, felines have the most carnivorous diet, and so even their molars and premolars are going to be sharp and angular. Herbivores, those that consume just plant material, they're going to have more well-developed molars and premolars. Sometimes the canines and or incisors are lacking or not as well developed. One modification that herbivores typically have is that they lack the canines and maybe the second set of incisors, and so they have this gap, so they can grab a branch and slide their mouth along it to scoop up the leaves. Okay, so here you have a child's skull. They've marked a couple of the permanent teeth, but if you look closely, you can see there are more. The deciduous tooth is going to be blocked as the permanent one develops. It's going to block off the blood flow, and so that tooth will fall out. Most people have to have their wisdom teeth removed because a lot of times the jaw doesn't lengthen enough for it to come in straight. And so you can already see that this one is going to come in at an angle. Sometimes it's so bad that they come in straight or try and come into the rest of the teeth. And so that's why they often have to be removed. Some people have more than one permanent tooth that come in, so they'll lose the deciduous tooth, and then for some reason they lose that permanent tooth to get replaced by another. I have one nephew that he never developed one of his canines. And so now he has a prosthetic tooth or implant. And then a niece who, when we had her go in to get her wisdom teeth removed, she only had 2 wisdom teeth. She didn't have the others because the size of her jaw didn't even allow the wisdom tooth to develop. So sometimes you have more than one, and sometimes you don't get any of those permanent. Okay. The salivary glands are 3 sets of glands. You have the parotid glands, submandibular glands, and sublingual glands. They all have tubes or ducts that empty into the mouth. They collectively secrete saliva, which is going to begin starch digestion because it's got amylose, the enzyme that digests amylase, which is the other term for starch, and it starts dissolving inorganic substances, creating a solution. So there's lots of water in saliva. Part of your digestive assignment that we will do on a different day includes going through what saliva's components are and their actions. So for lab, you just need to note that the 3 salivary glands secrete saliva to begin starch digestion and dissolve inorganic substances. So again, you're going to use your lecture notes to fill in your lab functions. Okay, so deglutation, a term I've been using, of a bolus. So a bolus is this green thing in the mouth. A bolus is a soft mass of food and saliva produced by mastication. So mastication is crushing, grinding, mixing food and saliva to make a bolus. So they go hand in hand. Mastication involves the teeth, the tongue, both palates, the masseter, the temporalis, and the digastric muscles. So functions for the teeth, the tongue, and the palates would all be mastication. The tongue and palates are also involved in deglutition. So once we have this bolus, so yes, you're supposed to spend time chewing your food. Deglutition is the reflexes involved in moving the bolus from the mouth into the oro and laryngopharynx and down into the esophagus. This is more than just what people refer to as swallowing. You have a series of reflexes. You have to relax and contract in a sequence. There is smooth muscle tissue and skeletal muscle tissue. The bolus is also used as a single large dose of medication. So, yes, that term is used in more than one instance. All right, so that will be the end of Section A or Part A of Chapter 25.